Hey guys, it's Richard Oldner here. We're live. It's 7:40 or so, so we're late. I had a bunch of stuff to do because we were barbecuing. We were using some of that good propane 4200, gas fuel. But today I posted a really cool video that I think is probably guys are gonna like, and I'm sure I've already talked to Uncle Tony about it. So because it's a Dodge, so he's obviously very happy about it. We've got a 340 six-pack, which in my opinion is kind of the coolest 340 that they offered. I know that the 4-barrel versions did well and they made lots of power, and maybe it can be argued that for driving around, maybe it was a better combination. But the six-pack deal was cool for a number of reasons. First, it was made lots of power, and because it's a six-pack. I mean, let's face it, if one carburetor is good, then two is better, then three, better still. So the tri-power stuff was good. They made lots of power, and they were in very, very cool looking cars. In fact, other than wanting a Hemi Cuda because it's really, really, valuable, I think that my favorite car would be a six-pack. It would be a TA Challenger or the AAR Cuda for All American Racing from Gurney and the guys who did very, very cool stuff back in the day. But I really like the six-pack motor. And although I wasn't able to run one myself, luckily I stumbled upon one when I was at WestTech the last time. The guys from Mazzolini Racing, and if you guys are Dodge guys, you know who Bob Mazzolini is because he runs a lot of Dodge stuff when he's racing. They brought a customer's motor in, and so I thought, hey, Bob, can I talked to the guys there and said, hey, can I do a video on this? And lucky my good buddy Steve Brulé did the video of when they were running the motor on the dyno, and Ish over there on the chassis dyno side. Awesome, both of you guys. They were both able to take some pictures and some videos and stuff. So I was able to not only talk about how that one did, but also in comparison to the other muscle car small blocks that I've run there, because we run them under the same conditions. We run them up on the dyno. We put headers on them. They have an electric water pump or no accessories, basically. They have, obviously, Brulé obviously knows how to tune carburetors, and you would play with the distributor to get the optimum timing and balance and stuff, get the optimum power. And so they dialed in the 340 six-pack. And let's face it, even just doing a video, even had we not compared it to all of the muscle car small block Chevrolet versions and then the Boss 302 and the 351, the thing by itself still would have been very cool, because not very often do we get to see tri-power stuff run. Now, Dulcich will occasionally run. He's got a tri-power 440 that they've done testing on, which is cool. But I think that that's probably more common. I think that they use the tri-power 440 stuff in more applications than they used the 340, because it was very, very limited, and they didn't continue that after they ran them on those two applications. So you don't see very many of them. And again, it's 3 2-barrel. So it's very, very cool. And not only that, the thing that I like about the Dodge, the six-pack, is that it actually worked. It worked obviously on the engine dyno, but I've also seen them running around. And the tri-power setup runs primarily on the center barrel, the center two barrels, if I remember right. And the thing actually drives. A lot of times the tri-power setups from the factory, a lot of guys will take them off and replace them with single 4-barrels. And then maybe guys did that, but those cars now are so valuable that if you have a numbers matching deal, it's like big, big money. But those things actually worked. So they made good power, and they worked, and they drove around, and they were, they were good performers. I know that they were rated awfully low, and I know that this particular combination, if you guys have watched the video, if you haven't, make sure you go do. And if you have, you know that this thing had a cam in it from Comp, and even though it's their kind of, muscle car cam, I doubt that it's an exact duplicate of the factory cam. And Comp being them, they know what they're doing, and they know how to make cams. And so if you take a cam even that has the same duration specs and stuff, the extreme energy or the other load profiles, the modern load profiles are much better than the older stuff. So my guess is that cam is responsible for at least some of the additional power that I would suspect we would get out of a 340. But again, I don't know, and I would really like to test one in exactly the same manner as I ran the others. I did everything that I could with the DZ302 and the 365 horse and 375 horse 327, because we ran a Fuelie version too, although I didn't include it in this video. And the LT1 350, I also ran a 71, the lower compression version, although I didn't do that exactly the way that I should have. We ran Shelby 289s and a regular Hypo 289. I ran a regular Cobra Jet 351. So I ran a bunch of combinations. I only included a few in this one, but I'd like to do that with the 340. I'd like to get a real Dodge 340 cam. And again, I mentioned in the video that because I read things both ways. Obviously, I did my homework and went in and researched all this stuff to try to find out what exactly they did. And I'm getting conflicting results. And maybe Uncle Tony has an opinion on this. I hope that he does. I don't know if they put the... I'm told that the cam was a carryover from the 344 barrel. But I don't know, and I've read it both ways, whether or not it was the manual version, which was a wilder cam grind, than the automatic version. So I don't know which one of those that they actually used in the 6-pack motor. But if they used the bigger of the two cam, obviously it would make more power. And it would be interesting to do a comparison because I haven't seen that, and maybe some of the Mopar guys have done that. I'd like to see a back-to-back test on the manual versus the automatic camshaft, and see if there is a difference, which I suspect that there is. Yay, Todd. Pork Chop AK. Troy says howdy. Hey, Troy, T-Dog, what's up? And thank you very much. I'd like to see a comparison of that, because if there is a difference in the cams and the difference in the performance, normally what we expect to see is if one makes more power on the top, it usually makes a little less power on the bottom. And that's what I suspect in the automatic and the manual cam, based on the change in duration. Hey, on the 340, maybe it makes more power everywhere because the 340 might have enough displacement. On a 318, we might see a bigger crossover. On a 360, we might see less. But that would be interesting stuff. So I'd like to see that. And if maybe Uncle Tony has done it, maybe Dulcich has done it. But I would like to kind of see that and see what that is. I don't think anybody would really, I don't know if people would really use either one of those cams given what we now have available to us. If you're building a 340 or a 318 or a 360, more likely, because the 340 is a really hard displacement to build anymore because they're really hard. It's hard to find those blocks. I know. I've been looking for one because I wanted to do exactly this. I wanted to build a reproduction version of the 340 with the right compression ratio, with a right camshaft, or at least an exact reproduction of that original camshaft, assuming I knew which one it was. And then the X heads, although I would substitute a J head for the X head because getting the rockers for the X head would be a little more problematic. And those are even rarer than the J heads are. And putting together a J head with the right valve size is not a big problem, because the 340 had a 202 intake valve, and the other stuff, the 360 stuff, had the smaller intake valve. But it's pretty easy to get the right size valve. And I'm told by the Dodge guys like Dulcich that those heads, there isn't a big difference in the flow rates of those heads. So it'd be like putting, like with the Chevys, almost all of those Fuelie heads flowed the same, all of the factory ones. There would be as much of a discrepancy between different castings of the same casting number as there would be between the different castings. I know people had their favorites and they liked certain ones. And I put 3 different casting Fuelie heads on the 302 and the 327 and the 350 because they had different ones from the factory. As they got later and later, they used different castings, and I searched and found. Sometimes I had to borrow them. Sometimes I had to buy them. I wanted to make sure that I had the right things. I wanted to make sure that I had the right intake manifolds because they had different intake manifolds. The one thing I did do on those is use the same carburetor. We used a 750. For instance, on the Boss 302, it was really hard to find that Autolite carburetor. I mean, like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 hard to find that carburetor. If you look at the guys from Pony Carburetors who sent me a 780, an original 780 that they had redone for the DZ302, but the thing is, even that is a $2,000 or $2,500 carburetor because it's a matching numbers deal, and it's all done so that it looks and is exactly like an original one. I don't want to run stuff like that because I don't even want to unbox stuff like that. So we just used a 750, and I figure if a guy was going to run a Z28 motor, either DZ302 or the Corvette motor, the 327 or the LT1, that they would have fiddled with the carburetor to make it right. It's also hard to run, or harder to run, a vacuum secondary carburetor on the engine dyno anyway. We normally just remove the vacuum secondary portion of it and just make it a mechanical one so that they open up simultaneously, and then it acts more like a double pumper kind of thing. and that usually works out pretty well. So those are some changes that we did, and the same thing with the 340 is it had slightly lower compression than factory. It had 9.5 to 1 and not 10.25, which I think that the Dodge was. It also had the comp cam in it and not the factory cam. So we had a trade-off between those two things. And I don't know which way it would go. Would it come down on the top and maybe go up in the bottom or whatever? But I'd like to do a reproduction of one of those and see what it actually does. And then I can kind of compare it to these other things that I've already done in similar fashion. And then what do you guys think? I don't know if anybody out there is an AMC guy or a Pontiac guy. The Pontiac guys, I'm sure, well, all of our motors, because you can't tell the Pontiac guys that a 455 Pontiac is a big block. No, these are all, there's no big block and small block. This is Pontiac. This is different. Like Buick is the same thing. Oh, they all use the same block. So technically you could run a 455 as a small block, but to me, that's a big block because a 454, a 455, a 460, all of those are bigger. If we were to do a small block, you might do a 301 or a 303 if you can find those. Or obviously I think that there's an HO 350 in the Pontiac. But would you go all the way up to a 400? Is a 400 still a small block territory? Tom Nelson's little brother, Nolan Nelson, has passed away 2 weeks ago today. Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry to hear. I'll have to send Tom a message. I didn't even know about that. Tom's a good guy. I've spoken with him a number of times, and he does amazing work over there. He definitely knows how to make power. So, heartfelt sorrow for Tom, and you losing your brother is never a good deal, man. Okay, let's see what you guys are doing. We've got that. Obviously we did the propane startup test on the 4200. I've got more testing coming. I've got some exciting stuff that I want to do with the Barra deal. So let me know what you guys think. I'm thinking that the Barra and a transmission would be good in my Mustang, in my 88 notch. For a long time, I've wanted to put a 302 back in it. I ran around a long time with a Vortech 302, and that was fun. And we ran the Silver State. We did all kinds of cool stuff. And then, over the last 10 years or whatever, I'm thinking it would be really nice to have an all aluminum LS in there because it would make a lot of power. It would be light. It would be really cool. But it'd be like everybody else's Mustang. A Barra in there would be unusual. And a turbo Barra that was making good power would be super fun in it. And I wouldn't care that it ran 8s like a turbo 6-liter or 5.3 or whatever in an LS. That wouldn't be the goal. Anymore. I think it being an other guy's thing and just being unique, a Barra in that Mustang, because that Mustang has done a lot of stuff. A lot of guys don't realize how many magazines it was in and how much fun I had with it and how many different things I did because it was awesome. And to put a Barra in there and a turbo Barra in there would kind of be awesome. So let me know what you guys think about that. Let's see. Aaron says I need to do a Miata with a slant 6. I've heard that that's already been done, so I don't want to be just like everybody else that's doing the slant Miata crossover. Let's see, Bruce. When you finish with the 360 Magnum Dynaflog, you can run the 360 Magnum of the 6-pack setup. Cam similar to the 340 headers and see what it does compared to the 340. Well, Bruce, my plan actually is, and I didn't want to say this out loud because I didn't want somebody else taking my idea and running with it like that would happen. I'm of the opinion, and going back and looking through the data, I think it's an HV1. I take that back. It's an EH1 version of the 360, which is a modified version of the E58 360 that was used in the Little Red Express truck. I think looking at the specs, because it had the 340 cam in it, it's lower compression than a 340, but it's bigger and it has the J heads. It has a small valve J head. I'm wondering how that motor would compare to a 360. My guess, being bigger, is that it would be interesting comparison because I think the 360, even with lower compression, would make as much or more power than the 340. So I'd like to see, that's one thing I'd like to do with a 360. I'd like to put it in that configuration and run it on the dyno and see how it does. I like to build a Little Red Express tribute motor and then compare it to, I'd like to compare it to a real 340. I don't know that this one that we just ran compares it, but we have that data and I can obviously compare it to that. I don't think that even with the 340 cam, now if I put this comp cam in there, that would kind of be interesting because like I said, the 360 has low compression. It's only 8.5 to 1 or thereabouts, but it has a good head on it. It has a J head on it. It has a good intake manifold on it. It has a big carburetor. And if we ran it with headers on the 360, I don't know. I'm thinking that it would do really well. Currently building an original Boss 351 Cleveland. Those are good. That's kind of my favorite, like small block Ford deal. After we ran the Boss 302, I really took a liking to that because it's definitely other guys' material. Nobody gives the Boss 351 any credit, partly because they don't like the body style of that Mustang. And I understand the Shinoda body style stuff in 69 and 70 is really pretty impressive. I really like it. But I think the other one has a better motor. That 1971 is kind of the end of the muscle car era. And that 71 Boss 351 like went out with a bang. It's pretty cool. Let's see. You remember the 514 Ford crate motor test? If you had a dual plane intake, do you think it would make the peak torque 60 down as low as 3,700 from roughly 4,500? I think a lot of times when we run a dual plane and single plane on those big motors, the dual plane actually makes less torque than the single plane does. It would certainly make it at an earlier RPM, but a lot of times when we run those dual planes, and this is the case with the big block Chevy and the 351 Windsor, that the dual planes were not designed for like stroker versions or high horsepower versions of these motors. So it's sized for more like a stock one. So it's fairly restrictive to a stroker version like that because it was designed for a 429 or even a 460, but something that's 514 inches making power is going to be not a good match for the dual plane. So it might not make the same torque. It might make a lot less torque and make it at lower RPM. Yeah, Bruce, the 360 versus the 340, I think that would be an interesting comparison. And I think that if we open people's eyes about the 360, a 360 is a lot more available than a 340 is. And then once we do the Magnum, I think the Magnum probably will be even better, but we'll have to see. Do you still have the flow numbers for the 454 Vortech heads? I might have them somewhere. They might be in one of the videos or one of the stories that I did. We need a twin engine Miata that has a Barra and an Ameribarra. So it goes both ways then, right? The Little Red Express truck was the fastest truck in the world at the time, at least according to the information that I was reading. 351 Cleveland M code, custom grind, 11 to 1, going to dyno mid-June. Yeah, let me know about the results. I did a bunch of testing on a 351. We used the short block from the Boss 351. We also used it as a Cobra Jet with a hydraulic cam. And again, with the Boss, I didn't put the aluminum intake on there because I couldn't find it. I just used the iron version. And then we used a 750 Holley instead of the Autolite carburetor. But on the Cobra Jet one, we used the hydraulic flat tappet camshaft, same heads, same short block, same iron intake, and same carburetor. But then we put a modern comp cam in it, and we put also a set of or an Edelbrock intake manifold on there, an RPM air gap. And that picked up power quite a bit, even though the RPM air gap was designed for their heads, which have much smaller ports, and they were much smaller than the big ports that we had on the factory heads, but it still worked very well. The Little Red Express truck was supposed to get W2 heads. Yeah, they put those on the prototype, but there was no way to make those work on a production deal. Thermal bog. Okay, let's see. Kevin, AMC Gen 2 V8 290 to 390, 1966 and 69 are short deck. 70, 390, 304, 360, and 401 are tall deck. So those are the big block ones then, right, Kevin? Weren't the 72 and 73? Yeah, they started changing the compression on the 340s, which is kind of where I was getting my information on. I wanted to see what the gross versus net power outputs were on the 340 versus the 360, because we only really have, by the time Dodge introduced the 360 with the 4-barrel, they were already into the net rating. The 351 Cleveland, in my opinion, is still a small block. It's not a 460, which a lot of guys for some reason want to categorize it as, but it's not. I mean, look at the deck height compared to a 351 Windsor. It's definitely small block material. Yep, all the Mopar guys want 440s. Although I'm told whenever we talk to Dulcich, the 383 Mopar is the best motor ever made. Although I think that the 400 is pretty cool too. Yeah, was the I don't remember if I think that the carburetor on the Little Red Express was probably a thermoquad. I don't think it was a quadrojet. A triple motor Miata. Now you're just that's just crazy talk. Yeah, Mike, I think a 6-pack would be cool, but a modern version just so that it looks cool. I really like the air cleaners on them, and I really like the way that the 70, the AAR CUDA and the 6-pack, those two twins, I like the way that the Challenger and the CUDA, I like the way that they looked on the outside too. I thought that they were great. That's right. Fastest U.S. production vehicle, 78. Well, in 79, I know that they detuned it a bit because they had to put a cat and stuff on it because there was a loophole in the emissions laws because it was a truck or something, that they were able to not have it on the 78 version, and they had to put it on 79. Yeah, Mark, compared to other small blocks at the time, 351 Cleveland had the best heads. They did. I mean, I put that in the video. The ones that I tested, I flow tested 2 different 351 Cleveland 4V closed chamber heads and 1 set of Boss heads, and they were almost identical. They all flowed 275 CFM, which is, a guy with a Fuelie head would just be drooling at those kind of flow numbers. Yeah, the 360, Aaron, you're right. I think that the 360 would have been a better choice, because the thing that I like about the 360 is Chevrolet had a 350, Ford had a 351. So rather than have a 340, which is already starting out in a hole, and let's face it, the Dodge heads were not great, not compared to a Boss head. And so having a 360 instead of the 350 and the 351 would have definitely given them a leg up. Not that obviously the 340 worked well. Yeah, Brad, the latest, and a lot of guys didn't realize that, but before they switched over to the Magnum, the LA stuff, the latest versions of the LA actually had roller cams. On a 514 Ford going from single to dual plane, do you think would move torque peak down 800 RPM? That seems like a lot. I'd have to look and see on. I've done lots of single plane, dual plane stuff. I'd have to look on a big block to see that's 514 inches or somewhere near there and see what the change was. Bruce, do you recall what the data was for the 360 that ended up in your van? You tested a couple of cams. Yeah, we tested a 252, basically an emissions legal flat tappet, pure energy, or might have even been the first level of extreme energy cams. And then we also tested a 268, which is like a 224 cam. And that thing worked well. We also tried Edelbrock heads. We had ported stock heads. We tried different intake manifolds and lots of different things on that 360. But that video is up. You can look at the 360 video and see All of that data is there. John, according to the information on the internet, and it's on the internet, so it has to be true. The Little Red Express was the fastest production truck at the time in '78. Little Red Express could do wheelies off the showroom floor. That's some good marketing. The Little Red Wagon is a different thing than the Little Red Express. The Little Red Express is a factory production vehicle. Little Red Wagon was the cool, like, wheel stander demonstration vehicle that they had at the drag strips. What would horsepower be on a 408 LS with Ls3 intake, 823 heads, 10 count 469? If you look up on that exact combination, well, not as a 408. I don't know. Stock rec port heads, 10.5 to 1, 468. I'm still thinking it's going to be sub 600, 580 or something like that. Yeah, Mark, that's why I want to. He's saying the 360 was late to the party, like the 400 small block, and they were used for a different application. But like I said, that 360, I really want to do a duplicate of that motor and find out with the good 340 cam. It's funny that they call it that. The 400 gets lumped into the 460s, in with the 460s by the truck guys, but the 400M, or they just call it a 400 because people get mad, but a 351M, which is the same block as the 400, those are more like, those are an intermediate between the 351 Cleveland and then the 460s. But the 351 Cleveland, I count as a small block. The 400, I don't really. That's a mid-level kind of thing. That's kind of in its own deal. Jim, thermoquad on the Little Red Express. Okay, same as the Police 360. That's what I thought. I thought it was a thermoquad, which again, Dulcich loves the thermoquads. I don't have a lot of experience with one. I had one on my van, but it ran good, so we didn't do a bunch of tuning with it. Bruce, you keep asking the same question over and over, and I've already answered it. The 408 stroke or 360 is a good combination. I thought that the Rambler 287 and 327 Vigilante were the big blocks. Yes. The 360 FE never gets any respect. How about a 352 FE? 4.633 via GT's Rise would make a cool EFI tripartite. Yeah, somebody did that. As a matter of fact, there's a video. Oh no, he didn't do those. He did he did 3 drive-by-wire factory 4200 Atlas throttle bodies on his custom intake manifold, which is kind of cool. A 460 for my single cab. It depends on what you're trying to do with it. A 460 is really good for towing. You can also make lots and lots of power with them because there's lots of good cylinder heads with them. So that works too. A small block, if you're just trying to drive it around and you're not really towing and you just want to kind of race it around, the small block works good too. Yeah, Dean, I agree. The 400 is kind of cool. That's that short deck deal, right? Mark, you had a 71 340. Cool. An A body. I like those. 1985 318s has roller cams in some cars. Yeah, the LA stuff changed over to right before they went to Magnums. They changed over to roller stuff, and I think that the 318 probably got it first before the 360. Yeah, 360 6-pack would kind of be cool. Ira Gibson got the job with Hendricks. Good job, man. Congratulations. Little Red Express was faster than the Corvette. Nice. Why didn't Dodge make a Hemi head for the small block during the horsepower wars? What they needed was, I mean, the Hemi was obviously a step up in head flow compared to the 440 stuff. But for their 440 and 383 and 400, Dodge needed a head. I mean, those big blocks basically had small block heads on them. They needed a lot more flow, and they would have been really, really impressive. Man with a plan, why don't you have a show for Motor Trend? If you could, would you want a show on Motor Trend? They haven't asked. I've been on Engine Masters and done some stuff with those guys, which is always awesome. We did the turbo stuff and a couple of other things. Usually when they do boost, they kind of call me because I have a lot of experience with it. But, you know, that would be a decision I'd have to make. It would depend mostly on on how much time it took. Yeah, Ford had multiple V8s. The Y block, FE, MEL, and the Windsor, Cleveland, big blocks. I'm more of a Warlock fan. Bruce, I've seen the Engine Quest heads, and I don't know if they're still available or not, but we would like to try them. They're, I think that they're probably like a 360 Magnum head, especially if it has the smaller valve. I think they used a 188 or something on the J heads and then on the later stuff in the 360s. But the 340 used a 202 valve, I think. It might have been a 2.0, but I think it was a 202. And it flowed a little bit more. But all of those were like 200 or really low 200 CFM heads, I think. Ford spent millions of dollars developing the Cleveland and 429 heads. I thought that they just stole those from the big block. Oh, dang, shots fired about the Chevy Ford stuff. I had Mike says I had a 318 with J heads, purple shaft, and a 72 Dart, and around low 13s. Nice. Chat seems way behind. I still haven't scrolled down to the bottom to get to where people are. I've just been going through some of the stuff. I can get all the way to the end, but then I would lose a lot of questions that I didn't get through. So I kind of like going back I'm going to go back and get through them. Watch out for the pan on the other side of the Magnum intake manifold. They were known for failing, causing the engine to burn oil. Just talking about cars in general. So is LPG EFI a thing? Yes, it is. Take a look at the Barra stuff. In Australia, 302 Clevelands and 351 Clevelands, all 4-barrel after 1976 were thermoquads. A great car when serviced properly. The plastic parts and float levels and adjustable mechanical secondaries were difficult. Yeah, and you guys can bring up whatever you want, and you can talk about anything, any subject. I mean, we just kind of start with something that is current and something that I was working on, but had a 93 Corvette. If you told me you had an 83 Corvette, then that would be something. What do you think about the first gen Lightning with 351? Those were good transplant motors for guys to put into Mustangs because it was a 351 and it had a good intake and stuff on it. So those were good to put into back in the day to put in Mustangs. .340 and an 850 thermal quad, and I think that they use that big one on the 78 Little Red Express too. Yeah, Jack, I've seen those part number. I've looked that stuff up and seen the part numbers, but I've never seen anybody show me exactly which cam they used in the 6-pack versus the regular 340. And there wasn't all of the information that I wanted on the different cams. The Little Red Express engine was different than the police motor, at least according to the information that I got. Andy, I don't know. I've never tried to bore out the 400s. I can't remember what we did on the one that I ran long ago. I think that we ran it with the pistons that I had in it. I don't think that we bored it. I'd have to check with my machinist to see how far they've gone on those 400s. Oh, if the Engine Quest head flows 230, that's actually pretty good. The 340 was in response to the 350 horse 327. So that's the L79. I have a video up on that. I have the L79, which is the 350 horse 327 with the hydraulic flat tablet cam, and then also the L46, which is the 350 version of that, although the components that they use are a little bit different. And then also the L82, which is the later version, and it made the least amount of power of all those. But like we normally see, and just like we saw on the LT1 versus the 327 and the 302, as we go up in displacement, it adds a whole bunch of torque. And the same thing happened with the 350 horse 327 and the 350 horse 350. So EQs are now cast in China, not the same heads that they used to be. A 4-barrel makes more power than a 6-pack. I'd like to see that. The Magnum is 192 by 1625. That's a big exhaust valve. And the outflow, the 20216, 3/8 tree trunks, and the J heads. The Fuelie heads had 202s in it. They had a 20216 combination. And then they also, a lot of the stuff had 194 and 15s. Yeah, Alan's saying 202 on the 340 also. And then they went down to 188. And that's the J head that they would have used in that 340. And then also that they carried over into the 360 stuff. So Brad, you put some Speedmaster heads on your 360. They work pretty well. That's pretty cool. And Bruce was saying, don't do the big TV stuff. But then I can have my own trailer and I can have like all green M&Ms with all the lettering licked off of them. Speedmaster Magnum replacement heads are nice. Are they iron, Aaron? Yeah, and they had on the Lightnings, that's right. They had GT40 heads. Yes, real GT40 intake manifold on those first-gen Lightnings. We like those. Warnock was a trim package. LRE was a performance package. I had a 79 LRE. That was a great truck. So I'm going to have to look up the LRE stuff. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot with the likes. Hey, 198 and 71. Come on, guys. Get those likes up. What is a good 302 small block forward head? Michael, take a look at the video that I have up where we tested all kinds of small block forward heads. There's lots of good stuff. TrickFlow makes good stuff. Dart, Airflow Research. There's lots of good inexpensive stuff out there. ProMax stuff. The 340 heads that were run on this motor on the dyno were not flowed. You can probably find the cam specs from an NHR blueprint for the stock class. That would be a good source. I might talk to Freiberger to see if he can get a hold of that, or Dulcich. They might have that information. I had a hard time finding the Boss 302 specs also, and then the Boss 351 stuff back when I was doing that. The L79s had a really good reputation. The 350 horse 327s, especially in the Chevy 2s, they were a force to be reckoned with back in the day. You can make lots of torque with the 2-bolt main stuff. Chevy did have high dome pistons. They had high compression up to 1970, and then 71 they lowered it. But when I had to do the 302 and the 327 and the 350, we had to have 3 different dome styles to make it 11-to-1 with essentially the same CC head, but with a different displacement. So the 302 had a much bigger dome than the 327, and then we went down again to the 350 because the displacement obviously adds compression. Richard, I'm looking to upgrade my Ford 302 with bigger heads, but I don't want to run into the issue of valve clearance. Well, and that's also going to depend on your camshaft. If you have a stock camshaft, you don't have to worry about that. If you're going to change the heads, you're probably going to change the camshaft too, but you're going to have to put something fairly mild in there. If you change your pistons, then you could put whatever kind of head on it you want. And if you're going to change the piston, you put a flat top piston in it with valve reliefs, and then you could put an Airflow Research or a TrickFlow head, like an 11R head on there, and put some, well, with the twisted wedge head, you're going to need a dedicated piston for that because it has a different valve relief position. So make sure you look at that based on your head choice. All the other stuff is an inline valve typically. So put an inline valve piston, which is pretty standard. And then you can run lots of camshaft, and depending on how much power you want to make. Off-topic question. I always hear from drag racers that a single 4-barrel will make more power than a dual quad. Not than a tunnel ram, but possibly more than dual quad factory style manifolds or even some aftermarket stuff. Dual quad stuff is typically, it was more of a gee whiz thing from the factory. They had dual quads and they wanted those were kind of sexy, so that people bought them and they looked cool, and they rated them at higher power, just like Chevy did with the tri-power setup on the 427 in the Corvette. The L88 and the ZL1 obviously made more power. And really, the L72, the single 4-barrel version of the 427, was a better motor than the tri-power was. But a lot of guys wanted the tri-power, was rated a little bit higher. So if you're going to get the best, you got to get the best. But most guys took those off just like they did with the small blocks and the fuel injection. They took those off, put a dual plane on, put a single 4-barrel, and went out and ran it because they know how to make that work. What type of headwork are you planning on the slant? We probably will do some porting with that. Right now, it's just been redone. It just has new valve job and valves and heads and stuff, and springs so that we could put camshaft in it. The T Challenger is my ProCharge Mopar. The T, who should know a thing or two about Mopars, right? With a handle like that. TA Challenger is my 3rd favorite behind the 68 Charger and the 68 Coronet. 4th would be 68 Dart. Too bad I was born in 69. The Mopar 6-pack carbs were designed by Holley for the 1967 427 Corvette, and they also were shared with the 340 and the 440 in Mopar land. Richard, did you ever do a video about fuel systems on a turbo application? Like, what do you want to know? I don't normally get involved in the fuel pump side of it because we have a big fuel pump on the dyno, and then we run. For me on the dyno, it would only be injector size. I guess I could talk about fuel rails or fuel lines, but we have a good pump, a good filter, a return style fitting. Although we also run that occasionally as a deadhead. So really, it comes down to injector size on the turbo stuff. You have to have a big injector if you're going to run E85, which we like to run E85 on most of the turbo stuff. Nice. Josh is putting together a 5.7 Hemi. Just put all the ring gap in it. That's good. It's always a good start for boosted stuff. Leak down after 10,000 miles. Didn't even make a needle move. Maybe 2% on the leak down. Nice. How to build a 750 horsepower Ford Cleavor the Engine Master's way. '68 Charger was the most beautiful Mopar ever. See, I don't agree with that. That's not those Chargers and stuff are not on my list. I like the 70 and the 71 Barracuda much better. What do you think about the torsion bars versus coil spring cars of the 60s and 70s? I think the torsion bars are a really cool idea. I like it. Yeah, except I didn't have, Jack, I don't think that the 6-pack was available in 1971, but it was rated at 270 horsepower, the same as the Boss 302 and the DZ 302 were all rated at 290. And I think that they all did that so that when they were competing, now they didn't run a 340, obviously, but they were all competing in Trans Am racing. I've been told that a 600 horsepower is about the limit for an NA 2-bolt Chevy. Could be an interesting test. It's not, because we've made lots more than that on a 2-bolt block. What's the most powerful LS? I may talk to Tom Nelson or somebody that have done. I've only done 1,500 with one. I believe to compare the 340 to the 351 for power, they should have comparable head flow. Why would you do that? They weren't made that way. I don't have any tips for a 1990 EFI 360. I haven't done anything. I mean, that thing's going to respond the same way that every other 360 does. You know, porting the head, a good valve job, a mild camshaft, a good intake manifold. If it's an EFI version, I don't even know what intake manifold they used on that. But make sure that you can tune that EFI setup, because you're obviously, if you up the power output, it's going to want more fuel. And if I had a 6-pack car, it wouldn't even be because I would be wanting to go fast. I would want to go to Cars and Coffee, and when I lift the hood, I want it to be a 6-pack. Yeah, a 71 Cuda with a shaker hood is definitely cool. And I wouldn't want to drive around in a Hemi. I would rather have a 340 6-pack. If you have a ready-to-go long block with no intake, small block Chevy, should I go for multi-port EFI setup or should I go to carb? It depends. Admiral, thank you again for the $5, which is awesome. But it depends on what you're doing with the motor. We try to persuade people not to put on these EFI throttle body deals on their motors if it's a car that you're not driving very much. Like if you're driving this back and forth like I do 1,000 miles and you want mileage, then multi-port EFI might be a good deal. But if you're just driving it around occasionally or 1,000 miles or something and it's a hot rod and a carburetor works just fine. And especially if you tune it, take the time to tune it properly, it will work really well. And a carburetor compared to a multi-port EFI, the carburetor is going to make more power on the same intake manifold. Dodge Brothers Engineering, I'm glad you made it. Greetings from down under. Awesome to see you guys. Any way to get 454 Vortech head float? I'll take a look and see if I have it. I should have said poorly swapped to V8. Rat's nest and a can of worms. That's not a good combination. Bruce, I would like to do another live deal with Uncle Tony, and I'd always be up for it. And I'm going to start doing those myself with having interviews and stuff, so I can have him on too. How would a 70 LT1 respond to a 280 Magnum 110 LSA? That would work. That would work just fine. They need a modern camshaft. They went down in camshaft with the LT1 compared to that 327 and the DZ302. They didn't. This one, the LT1 didn't get that dunt-off cam. It would have been a much more aggressive combination with that camshaft because it had the displacement. So it would have been a little better driver than the smaller motors were. And it had enough compression and it had the same head flow and basically the same induction on it. But any sort of modern cam is really going to wake that thing up. In fact, what most guys do is go down in compression and up in camshaft and then put a good head on it, and it's an even better combination. Yep, Admiral, that's it exactly. For a frequently driven car and you want fuel mileage and stuff, that's good. If not, and even for something that's driven a lot, guys ran carburetors for a really, really long time and they work really well. Yeah, Dodge Brothers, make sure you come back. L1 was hydraulic. The LT1 was not hydraulic. It was a solid lifter cam, but it was milder, much milder than the previous ones. Not trying to be that weird, but what's your favorite car? My favorite car is whatever the next one that I get. Just like my favorite engine. I really like my Chevy Sprint Turbo and my Civic VX and my Civic SI that we set the land speed record with, and the Sprint Turbo that I had, and the Ford GT that I had for a very brief time. Sean, that 351 really needs more camshaft. And also Edelbrock has a really good intake manifold for that. Richard, have you ever seen a Barracuda with a 426 Chevy? About 50 years ago, a guy pulled up at one of the local snap car mates, didn't know what he had, never saw the car again. What year was the Barracuda, Cody? Would like to see you make an honest 370 horsepower with cam swap only on a 70 LT1. Show GM that they needed to do as will support it at 200 CFM. They will. If we put the Duntov cam in it, which I don't like that cam either, because I know that they did a bunch with it back in the day, but that motor would make 370, I'm sure, with that camshaft. Yes, a GLH turbo would be awesome. Even not even a GLHS, just a GLH turbo. Wait, you had a Ford GT? 2006, red on white. Yes, for a very brief period of time. Do you have a video on nitrous plate versus fogger? Is the plate really better? A nitrous plate versus a fogger is not really a competition between which one of those is going to make more power, because the fogger can make more power if you do a fogger in each cylinder. That's what we normally do for distribution. So if we're going way up in power, you don't want to keep pouring it through the plate. So you want to get even distribution. And so you put fogger nozzles in each one of the cylinders and then you use that. If you use a single fogger, I think a plate would be better if you have a carbureted style manifold, even if it's an EFI one. I think a plate would have better distribution than injecting it in front of like the throttle body if you had an elbow or something on it. That's just my opinion. I don't have data to support that. But I think that with the crossbars that they use, I think you'd have better distribution into the common plenum of a single plane intake. 67 with a fastback window with a Hemi in it. That would be pretty crazy. Yeah, Dodgy Brothers. It's 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time is when I go on. This one was a little bit later because we were doing some Memorial Day stuff. The the Ford GT was awesome, and now in looking at the prices of them, I certainly wish I really couldn't afford it, so I had to sell it. But I wish I would have kept it because now it's worth a lot of money. It's worth house money now. The Ford GT was I think I had it for about 6 months, but I did drive it and we modified it. I put we put the pulley on it. We did the tune and all of that stuff, and it made a lot of power. We ran on the dyno at Westech on the chassis dyno, and Mahovitz helped me do the stuff to it. Unfortunately, it was kind of an interesting story. When I got it, we ran it on the dyno and the power was way down. I'm like, why is this Ford GT not doing what all the rest of them do? Well, coming to find out, we look in the intercooler reservoir and it's empty. So Ford had shipped that because this had been sitting in the dealership. It only had like 2 or 3 miles on it. It was the most awesome thing in the world to see a big, like, full-size semi pull down your street and have them offload Ford GT in this questionable neighborhood that I lived in. But it was awesome. But from Ford, when it came from Ford, the intercooler reservoir was not filled, so it had no water circulating through it. So once we solved that, then the power was back up, and then we did all the modifications to it, and it made more and more power and stuff. I've never messed around with a like 318 poly Mopar. I've seen them run. The guys at Westech had one and ran it, but I've never run one. Dewey, tell John Kazi I said hi. He's great people. That guys are super, super smart. The little @ sign is the shift number 2 if you're looking to do an @ Did Mopar make Barracudas with the 426 Hemis? I think that they use them for drag racing, and I don't know if they did low volume versions of that. I'm not a real Mopar history guy. What do you think of David Vizard? That guy's is awesome. I've spoken with him a couple of times, and he's been nothing but great with me. He's really good at porting, and he's very analytical, and I like doing his stuff. As a matter of fact, I should reach out and probably do something with him on his channel or on my channel. '68 Barracuda and Dart, I'm told, have Hemis in them. Thank you. Richard, DF Goblin with Turbo K24. What's a DF Goblin? Yeah, Dulcich is the go-to guy for me for Mopar stuff. Have you thought about making added turbo publications for the masses? I've written a number of books. I wrote 10 of them, and a turbo book would have been kind of a natural thing, but I don't think I'm interested in doing that again. I've been telling the guys, had been telling the guys at, when I first started, it was McMullen. But after Turbo went away, I had been telling them, you guys need to have a Turbo magazine. There needs to be a Turbo magazine. And I've been telling people that for years and years and years. And I think that, and I think that they should, because that was a good magazine. Kip gave me my first job writing, and I thanked him for that. And luckily I was able to take him to dinner and stuff and talk to him and thank him before he passed away. But I had an awesome time doing stuff with him. Uncle Tony's having Vizard on, I guess. Oh, that's good. Those guys will get along, because David's been doing it a long time, and so is Uncle Tony. Always wonder what happened to the idea of anti-reversionary headers. David did a test way back in the 70s. Yeah, the AR cones, I remember those. But the thing is, you actually want a reflected wave. I hope that that's not what they're trying to stop. You actually want a reflected wave coming back into the combustion chamber. That's part of the scavenging effect that improves induction. So I hope that that's not what the header design is designed to stop, because if that's the case, they don't want to do that. Oh, the David Freiberger Gremlin. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, the Hemi Barracudas and Darts were factory race cars. That makes sense. Did any of you guys go check out Boosted Boys today? I was on there while they were doing they're doing a live feed, because they were right at the cusp of getting to their 1 million subscriber mark, which is awesome for those guys. I like their stuff. They do a lot of cool stuff. So if you haven't checked out Boosted Boys, make sure to go check them out, because they were doing a long, and this live feed was on for a really long time, and I stayed on as long as I could because it was really cool. It's amazing to see their chat, just like stuff is just rifling by. I think that they had 3,000 or 4,000 people on their chat, and it was just going nuts. They had so many guys that were enthusiastic about it, and it was very, very cool, because they were going through, looking at a lot of they had all of their videos, they had their channel up on their screen, and they were going back and replaying sections of some of their really popular videos, and one that they had really fun, and doing some, behind the scenes talk about it. And it was really, really cool. And it's cool to see guys doing that and getting involved in that. And it's cool to see those guys, they work very hard, get to that 1 million mark, that 1 million subscriber mark. And they're obviously doing very well, because they do lots and lots of cool stuff. So if you haven't, go support the Boosted Boys. They deserve it. They work really hard. They do lots of crazy stuff, and they're not afraid to make boost. Dodge Brothers. It was what they were trying to stop, and probably why the idea never went anywhere. Yeah, the thought is that they only went halfway through on the AR thought. So they thought, okay, there's a reversion coming back to the exhaust. And their thought was that the reversion is coming back, and that's stopping all that exhaust from getting out. That's not what's happening. This reflected wave comes back as a negative pressure wave, and it helps draw induction in. And that's actually part of the scavenging effect. And that's what you want. There's some really, really good books that I've read that are very, very helpful on understanding that. And it's important. It's the reason why we get a supercharging effect from different runner lengths and different primary lengths and different scavenging from merge collectors and all kinds of different changes that you make. It's really, really cool. Yeah, it's like that. The Boosted Boys was like a Cletus chat. As a matter of fact, they ran a number of videos that had Cletus in it, and he was giving him shout outs, and they were drag racing and doing their 8-second Hondas and stuff. It was really, really cool. I would like to do a Godzilla, but and we'll have to see. Mohovit said he has one that we can do some stuff with, but we'll have to see. I watched Tony and David. No comparison. David's learned. David is the real deal. He's done lots of really cool testing and some really out there stuff, which I like too. And he knows how to the Rousey. Yeah, that was very cool. He knows how to port heads, and I think that Dulcich actually knows those guys very well, because he also Roger Helgenberger and Vizard and all those guys were kind of together, and Dulcich met them, I think, early on. And I think that that's where he got his porting knowledge, and Dulcich is the real deal also. Super Cobra Jet 429 versus a ZL1 427. Honestly, don't think that would be much of a fight. I think that the 427 is either an L88 or a ZL1 is going to make a lot more power than a Super Cobra Jet is. A Super Cobra Jet was not in that realm. I would bet a Super Cobra Jet would be down 100 horsepower compared to that 427. I'd love to see both of them. And I have been, right after I did all the small block stuff, I talked to the guys at Westech and people that they knew and people that we knew and everybody, because I wanted to do the similar thing with big blocks, but nobody was going to get me a set of L88 heads or, some of the stuff I could get, but just trying to find some of the stuff to make these now 60s and early 70s big blocks. Like I wanted to make an LS6. I wanted to make an L88. I wanted to make a simple L72 or an L89 with the aluminum headed version. I wanted to do some of those, but man, it would have been a really big undertaking, and it just was not, I couldn't do it. The 351 heads are superior to the 340. Yeah, the Cleveland head is and a 340 head are not even in the same league. A 340 head is more like a fuely small block Chevy head. Yeah, I saw Cletus's Elko. That's impressive. That thing's making some steam. Yeah, Vinny, a 254, 260 cam, and the W2 heads are a good step up from the factory stuff. Tunnel ram, always good. 650 double pumper. Did you have one carburetor on the tunnel ram, or did you do what everybody else did and put two 660 center squirters? Jessel's overhead cam follower for the Ford modular engines. You can spin it to 10,000 all day. I don't think that's the only thing stopping the RPM, though, on a Ford modular. L89, that's right. And a lot of guys don't realize that the L89 was not an engine, actually. It was an upgrade to an engine. It was an option, and you could get it on the 375 horse 396. You could get it on the 425 horse 427. So it was pretty cool. It was an aluminum head option for the big blocks back then. Your video is unstable. I wonder if I have bad. Yeah, my reception's not tremendous. Super Cover Jet with aftermarket heads will kill all. They do have some really good. There's some very good Ford heads available. Have you had anyone other than me have interest in AFR ASCAS heads for small block Ford? I'm wondering how they compare to a set of Renegades. I would think that that's going to depend on what you test them on. If you're testing them on a 350 or 400 horsepower small block, the ASCAS head is going to work just fine. Richard, can you swap some 335 series heads onto an LS and do some comparing? That's not an easy bolt-on to put that head on an LS or an LS on a Ford. It's not just an easy thing. Oh, 2 carbs, inch and 7/8 headers. That's what they would need. Matt, wisdom teeth. That's not good. I just put Ford stuff up today, Matt. An 05 Mopar Mag article, Dulcich got 236 and 201 out of stock Magnum heads. Yeah, I think that the Magnum head's better than the LA head. People put 335. So you want to do a Cleavor then. You want to put 335. You want to put Cleveland heads on a small block Ford, like a Boss 302, for instance, or a 351 Cleavor. I have videos up on a Cleavor stroker that we did. Dan, really anything is doable. Guys, cut those heads in half and put them on a 6-cylinder. So all of that stuff is possible, but that just because we can doesn't mean that we should. There's lots of Ford heads that are really, really good. There's no need to put an LS head on a Ford. And in my opinion, no need to put a Ford head on an LS because there's so many good LS heads. It would only be a gee whiz kind of thing. And I have way too many things that would be much higher on the list than that. Is the Friday beers thing still happening? It's not Friday today? Oh, Pablo, milk snake. That's awesome. I've been wanting to catch a mountain king snake, but a milk snake would be cool too because we don't ever see those here. Yeah, they do. They once you catch them and they chill, then they just want to hang out because you're nice and warm, and that's awesome. Goldie's Garage would love to see a 302 with an Explorer, GT40 heads running ridiculous compression and maxed out hydraulic roller cam, fly cut pistons. The problem with that would be is you could put lots of compression and lots of camshaft. You could put a single plane intake. You could do all that stuff, but the GT40 heads don't flow very much. They're a good upgrade compared to a stock head, but they're still like a 350 horsepower set of heads. Yes, it's only time and money. That's all that it takes. Yeah, the bore spacing is different. The cooling passages are different. It's all of that stuff is different. People just think that, hey, look at bolts on because the bolts are kind of in the same spot. It's not the thing. I don't know that I think I've tasted sake, but I've never had a bunch of it though. Yeah, the modifying for a 6-cylinder is definitely labor intensive. A running V12 Jaguar. Yep, those are cool. Are E7Ts really better than their predecessors? All of those production small block heads like the Hypo 289s, even all the way on up to the E7Ts, you're going to get minor variations. The GT40 head is a fairly decent step up above the E7s, but none of those are great. The 69 351 Windsor heads are supposed to be better, but all of those are like, this one's this much better than this one, and this one's this much, and all the aftermarket heads are like this much better. Daniel, so you're racing 346 packs with 428 Cobra jets? That seems hardly seems like a fair match. Yeah, I've seen the Cleveland-headed Ford 300, and it's doable, but it's a lot of work. Matt, I haven't seen the 4-cylinder that you're talking about. That Troy, that's cheap for a bunch of Boss 302 heads. I wonder if they're all damaged. I'd love to see some EFI 460 testing. The intake manifold on the EFI 460 is going to be kind of limiting, so you'd want to change that. Obviously, the camshaft. The EFI 460 heads, I guess, could be ported and made a little better, but not a ton. Yeah, back in the day, Dodgy, that you had to do what you could do. If you had to make something work, you made it work, and you spent the extra time because it was an advantage and nobody else could do it. But since we have heads that flow 400 CFM, it's a lot easier just to do that. Police package engine showdown, 440, 429. Yeah, those are all of that stuff is so hard to find anymore. Ford always under intake manifold everything. They were trying to on the 460s and on the 5.8s and the 5.0s. They were trying to have real long runner stuff, and they did this in the Mustang as well. And obviously GM did it with the tune port stuff. They were wanting to build lots and lots of torque. That was kind of their production deal back then, and they did. I mean, they were successful in doing that. The 5-liter was very torquey. The tune port stuff was very torquey. The trucks even more so because they wanted more torque. It was put together as a single head with a straight sticks. Yeah, that's kind of a cool deal. Aaron, that's actually the plan for the 360 Magnum. I'm going to compare the stock EFI intake to a simple dual plane carbureted deal. I want to test that because I want to show what that does, even just as an upgrade, just putting a carbureted deal in it rather than running it fuel injected. And I have 2 minutes and I need to get going, guys. And the truck stuff had the dual throttle bodies, which was super cool. We had throttle body envy when we had, I still have my Mustang, but we had throttle body envy because the truck guys had the cool stuff. Sonoramic intake, nice. When I measured the runners, it was 300 inches. That would be a lot. So what's 300 divided by 12? But I do think that they were, I'm thinking that they were in the longest ones were in the neighborhood of 3 feet. They were pretty long. A 95 Z28 Camaro LT1, that's a good motor. Those we've done some testing with those. How long before we were able to get the 340, 360 on the dyno? I just thought of it tonight. I can't find a 340 block. I'd like to build the 340 so that I can do one and have it be with the right camshaft and the right compression and stuff. The 360 would be a little easier because I already have a 360 LA motor. Right now I have a 360 Magnum, but it's not hard to find a 360 LA motor that I could make that version out of, which would kind of be cool. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you all for showing up. Hopefully you have all gone and taken a look at the 346 pack video, and also go check out the Boosted Boys because they were doing crazy stuff today. It was awesome. And if you haven't subscribed to them, make sure that you do, because you want to be one of the 1 million. I was long ago, and I wish that I could subscribe again to help them out because they're doing cool stuff. Thanks for watching, guys. I will see you tomorrow.